and welcome to the Friday Fantasy Show from the Bottled Imp, exploring the realms of fantasy. My name is Ken Boyter, and today we're going to be looking at, yes, NeverEnding Story 3. Oh yeah, you probably didn't even know they made 3 of them. I certainly didn't. I found out when I thought, oh yeah, NeverEnding Story, that's a bit of a fantasy classic. Does it hold up? Will it hold up? I'll watch it and find out. And lo and behold, not only did they make 1 of them, not even 2 of them, 3 of them. Now this one is, who's it directed by? Does it matter? Yes, Peter McDonald. There it is, found him in my notes. So I don't think Peter McDonald was necessarily a sort of star director back in 1994 when this was made. But nevertheless, obviously, you know, you get directors like actors. You get actors that are very proficient and they go along and they do their job. So similarly, you get directors that do the same. Now, this also is based on Michael Ende, if that's how you pronounce his name, Ende's novel, NeverEnding Story. But there's not a lot of similarities to what they've done here to anything in the book. In fact, it's only the character of Sebastian really, and maybe the father, that has been transferred into this. Everything else is completely made up by the screenwriters, the storyline, everything else is. So basically it's using the title and also 1 or 2 of the main characters. So let's find out. As I say, we have done a review of the first one and the second one. So what does the third one bring to the fantasy table? NeverEnding Story 3. I know, who would have thought? Well, I guess it is a never-ending story, isn't it? That's why there's 3 of them. They didn't make a 4th, though. I think I know why. What's the setup? Well, there's a prophecy that's spoken right at the beginning of the film. There's like a wizened old man, presumably he's some sort of magical guy, that the Nasty will arrive in Fantasia. So all the fantasy side of this takes place in a world called Fantasia, which will spell the end of their world. But a saviour is also prophesied who has extraordinary courage, and they will come and save them. So that's kind of the setup. But then we get transported to modern day. So I guess it's sort of present day 1994. Certainly the costumes and the clothes that they wear can indicate that. So what happens is the opening setup, apart from that, is fairly similar to Story 1, to the first one of these films, where you have Sebastian, he's running around, he's being chased by bullies, and he stumbles into, in the first one, it's into an old sort of magical bookshop where he finds the NeverEnding Story book. Well, they've pretty much done the same, where instead of it being into an old bookshop, it's actually into the school library. So he's been getting chased around his high school, and in he stumbles into the library, and there is the shopkeeper. Although he's not a shopkeeper anymore, he is a librarian. Now, I'm pretty sure they've used a different actor, which is fair enough, but I couldn't work out 100% if it was meant to be the same kind of shopkeeper, but now he's a librarian, or if it's just, oh, it's another character that looks very similar to the shopkeeper. Anywho, it's just a kind of, I guess it's a plot device, isn't it? But it's unfortunate, because where do I start with this film? What a mess. What a mess. So disappointed I was, because film 2 was surprisingly good. I would say film 2 is pretty much up there with the standard of film 1. Now, film 1, those of you that haven't watched my reviews of film 1 and 2, film 1, I actually watched it over the years and I loathed it to begin with way back, and then as time has gone on, it's actually better than I thought it was, and so I appreciate the first one now a lot more than I did originally. And the second one, yeah, you kind of think a sequel, certainly back in the 90s or sort of late 80s, early 90s, the sequels weren't known to be brilliant all the time, so I didn't have high hopes for it, but pleasantly surprised. So therefore I thought, yeah, they've kind of cottoned on to this. They kind of know how to make a sequel. The third one, surely they'll just do the same thing, they'll recreate the charm, the magic of the first 2. No, unfortunately no, they decide not to do that, and it might have something to do with the fact that they are riffing off of nothing. They're not using any of the source material from the book. Film 2 used a lot of stuff that wasn't used from the book in film 1, so there was still some sort of thought and logic to it, because I'm sure the author, when he wrote NeverEnding Story, had been building up, probably working on it for a couple of years, so there's a lot of thought in the story, into the characters. This one, however, that's sort of gone out the window. So they've recreated the first, section of the film. The first film they've recreated in the third film, but why? It's kind of like, well, can't you've run out of imagination and ideas, the storyline, why didn't you just kind of come up with something different? And most of the film, the other problem I have with this, most of the film is set in the high school, it's set in modern day, it's more about his family and his situation and how he's dealing with the bullies, and that's kind of fine but it's not enough fantasy then in that respect, because it then becomes more about a domestic kind of social drama. So it's kind of slightly confused about what sort of film it wants to be. Is it a fantasy that's kind of, that sprawls into modern day, and that's absolutely fine. Not all fantasy films have to be set in a separate world, where things are completely different or even slightly different from our world. No, you can have, characters come into our world, and that's absolutely fine. But then you've got to do it in a way that is still magical, that still has that charm. But unfortunately, it doesn't. You have some of the characters coming in from Fantasia, so they're mythical, magical creatures, and they start to make jokes and references about modern day living, when there's no indication that they know about our world and that they've studied our world. So there's a couple of characters that then sort of make a joke about air miles, and getting frequent flyer points. I'm thinking, that's so out of place, so out of character. So little things like that kind of tend to chip away at the credibility of what they're trying to do. Also, parts of the film seem to be completely out of place. And this is what I mean by also confusing what they're actually trying to do. What sort of film are they trying to make? There doesn't seem to be a clear vision in this one. For example, there's the rock people in Fantasia, and that's cool. That's kind of like there's a family of rock people, and that kind of has been right from the start, right from the first film. They had these rock people, and they're quite somber. I think there's only one in the first, and he's quite a somber character. He's rock and he's granite and he's somber and he's methodical and kind of slow, not necessarily slow thinking, but they've characterised what a rock person would be very well, and what your expectation of a rock person is very well. This time though, it's almost they've gone into sort of a bad sitcom, because they've got a rock person who is sort of clearly a bloke dressed up in a rock suit, which is fine, I guess, but the standard they set in the first film, where it was more a grander puppet. Well, I don't think it was CGI, but it just seemed huge, and it clearly wasn't a bloke dressed up in a rock costume. Not only that, he's married, so now it's a domestic situation. They've got a child, they've got a rock, I guess a pebble, and you kind of think, yeah, hang on, this is like the Flintstones, but nowhere near as well done. And then it starts going into sort of like a sitcom situation, and you have modern day music in this fantasy world. So there's a scene where they go to the mall, or they go to the shopping centre in the fantasy world. They go shopping, and then they got kind of, he gets on the motorbike, but it's a pedal bike, but then they put on this sort of heavy metal kind of theme tune that's modern day, so it's totally out of place, totally jarred. Now, I don't mind if you do a sitcom that's set in a fantasy world. It's a great idea, why not do that? But then still keep it in the premise, build up your rules and your premise, like any world building. Don't break them, but certainly don't then just shoehorn this into a film that the rest of it isn't quite like it. Completely out of place. The characters, they're flat, and they're very cliched. It's like they've not really bothered. They've just gone, right, oh look, let's just take this character off the peg and we'll put that in the film. What other fantasy characters are about? Let's put that in. And not only that, the actual modern day, there's the premise is that the Sebastian is his father's remarried, and so it's that, and the mother has a daughter, so it's the clash of the families, the step families. Will they get on? Obviously no, they don't, and the children, Sebastian and the daughter, they don't get on, and so it's that sort of clash, and that's fine, but that really should be necessary. That should be a backdrop, but in a way they're not well-rounded enough, so they just come across as being a little bit cliched. A surprise for me, Jack Black is in it. Now, I don't think I've seen that many films with Jack Black in, but he's very good in this film. And I'm not saying he's bad in other films, I'm just saying I haven't seen enough of him to sort of warrant an opinion. He's obviously very successful, he's very popular, so he's doing something right, obviously. So this was really my first time I've kind of seen him where I've kind of known who he is. And he was probably the only one in the whole film that was believable. Oh, also a nice little surprise was Tony Robinson, who he plays Baldrick in Blackadder, which is a British sitcom. I don't know if everybody knows about that. Fantastic, very hugely popular over in the UK, and he's brilliant as well. Tony Robinson is brilliant, and he's very heavily latexed up. He plays like a tinker, sort of gnome type character. Absolutely fantastic, brilliant. So those two characters, Jack Black plays he's a teenager in this. Maybe he might be early 20s, but he's playing a teenager, high school kid, who is the bully. He's like the sort of human villain in all of this, and he's the bully, he's the nasty. Him and his gang are the nasty, which is what Fantasia prophesies, that they're going to somehow break into their world and take over. And so he every time he comes on screen, he blows everybody else off the screen, because he's so engaging. He's just a really good actor, and he does a fantastic job, as is Tony Robinson. Every time his character comes on, again, it just sparkles. Those scenes sparkles. So it's not that they don't know how to do it. It's just that I think, I don't know what went wrong. The other characters, they didn't write them well enough. The script wasn't good enough. And the storyline is all over the place. It's too convoluted. It's too diluted. And it's loose, it's baggy. There's scenes that don't need to be in there. There's probably characters that don't even need to be in there. So I didn't really connect, and I didn't really care about it. And that's a shame, because in the first film and the second film, you care about Sebastian. You want him to save Fantasia every single time. And that's the other problem with this film. They've run out of ideas. It's it's the margarine or the butter being spread far too thinly over the toast. It's just a lack of imagination. It just becomes boring. It's like a bad TV movie that even if it was on TV, you'd go, no, actually no, I'm not really going to watch this. I guess if you were going to stick through, obviously I stuck through, but it was, I guess, Jack Black and the gnome, Tony Robinson's character, that kind of keeps it alive up to a point, but really it's not enough to save it. There's the problem with it, I find, is that it is such a disappointment, because the second one was such a surprise. The standard, if you see what I mean, so say that's the standard of the first one, the standard of the second one was pretty close to that, but unfortunately the third one is so low. It's not like they were sort of close, it was so low, it's like, oh, what happened? How did this go so badly wrong? There is themes that do run in, so they have tried to put a bit of substance to it as well. And that's family. As I said, it's to do with, the conflict of what happens if two-step families get together, and what happens with that. So they have tried to put that element into it, and it's their families coming together, and can they resolve their differences? And, they do a fairly good job of exploring that, but unfortunately, because the characters are a little bit cliched, you don't really buy into it. You kind of know that, oh yes, it's going to get resolved. There are a few twists along the way, so it's not completely cliched, but that's kind of it. And that really is the only theme that they've put in there. The other two films, there was at least 3 different themes to get your teeth into, to get emotionally connected with. And unfortunately you don't. So overall, this has been such a disappointment. They just ran out of ideas, and you kind of think, well, how did that happen? Because if it's a never-ending story, surely you can come up with ideas to keep it going. After all, there are some film, series that carry on and on that don't run out of ideas. TV shows, especially these days, can still carry on for series 1, 2, and 3, and that's like maybe over 30 hours worth of television. And yet the ideas are still fresh and they still can keep it going. It just lacked charm. Now the first 2 films did have charm. They had a magical quality. You got swept up in the fantasy element of it. This one, no, you don't. There's no real charm. There's too many clashing parts, as I said. It's almost like they've spliced a few different types of styles of film into this. There seems to be a lack of vision of what they actually wanted to achieve with this. It was almost like they were just going through the motions. So, as I say, the standout points, Jack Black. So if you're a fan of Jack Black and you didn't really know he was in this film, you might want to check it out because he does give another solid performance as Jack Black, But, other than that, it's a missed opportunity. They really could have rounded off this trilogy. It's not a trilogy, I guess they're separate individual films, but they have tried to link it because it was never written as a trilogy. But they could have if they kind of knew, well, okay, maybe we are running out of ideas, but let's just see it off, let's do a good farewell. Massively disappointing, and it reflected that when it came out. It was $17 million it cost to make. It only had a box office of 7 million returns, so obviously they lost money, and that's a shame because that means the whole thing just went out on a whimper. Now I think though that history has been kind to NeverEnding Story because not a lot of people I think knew about, certainly not the third one, and possibly not even the second one, because the first one was very much when, if you watched that as a kid, you've at the time that it came out, that would probably resonate with you. It was one of those films that you kind of would cotton onto, and it would resonate with you, and it would stick with you, and when you look back on it, it'd be very nostalgic. Luckily, I'd say that the first one definitely stands up when you watch it. The second one, again, surprisingly good. This one, yeah, if you've watched 1 and 2, you probably want to watch this one just to be completist. I quite like to finish things right to the end. Unfortunately, this one just doesn't live up to the first 2, which is such a disappointment. So the NeverEnding Story, I'm kind of glad it has actually ended. Yeah. I won't do that. NeverEnding Story 3, yeah, what a disappointment, what a shame. So if you watch this, you probably want to watch the first one straight after, just to erase the memory. One thing I didn't mention was the special effects. You would have thought as the series progresses that the special effects would get better. Not worse. They really did. It seemed like this kind of scrimped on this. There wasn't as much care put into not only the special effects but even the film. It just didn't seem to have that love that the first 2 films had, and so consequently with the special effects, it was just all too modern. It was all too video gamey. It was all just too rushed, I think. I didn't look into the sort of background if there was any problems with the production, in terms of filming it. I suspect there probably was. There didn't seem to be that love and care, and if you don't put love and care into creative projects, it just becomes a sort of box ticking exercise, and audiences know that. We can sense it. So do better. But obviously, they're probably never. Do you know what? It's probably now time to do just a remake of the original. Just do NeverEnding Story. And I'm sure you could do just as good a job now as they did back then. So there you go, NeverEnding Story 3. Thank you so much for watching. Remember, please subscribe if you haven't done so already. And if you know anybody that loves fantasy as much as we do, then please share The Bottled Imp. And remember to keep it unreal. Unless, of course, you're a big flying sort of luck dragon thing. Yeah.